Welcome back to Light Reading, where I talk about the books/audiobooks that I consumed in the last month. Hi, my name is Gun Paladin, who also goes by Paladin Brie. I'm here to talk about the stories I read, the audiobook narrators, because they often do a really good job of portraying the book, and my general thoughts. Last time I just gave a more general review, and I'm going to be getting into more spoilers as I talk about the actual book, so be warned. During the month of February, I read Apprentice to the Villain by Nicole Maehrer, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett, and I also read the second book in the series because Olivie hooked Paladin up, Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. I read The Atlas Complex by Olivie Blake, and lastly, Harrow the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. Okay, so I admit, I read a lot of second books in the series, but it's not my fault. Olivie had delivered me like 4 books back to back, so I normally get to return books like 2 weeks early, but I was down to the wire with Harrow the Ninth, and just when I thought I'd have to pick up another book, Libby showed up with Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. So I was well fed this month. First things first, I read Apprentice to the Villain by Nicole Maehrer, once again narrated by M. Eldridge. As I said before, M. Eldridge grew on me, and I definitely appreciated her narration more in this book. And why I picked up this book, it was the next one in the series. With how the last book ended, I expected a bit more of like watching Evie reigning in the office, but we kind of dove right into her enacting her plan and then getting to dissect the plan through the eyes of the villain, which was a different take on it. So no real complaints there. There were aspects of the romance that I liked and some that I was indifferent to. I actually loved that Evie is so self-assured in her feelings for Tristan, and I didn't like how much Tristan thrashes against the relationship the whole time while simultaneously drowning in his feelings. Stop. This is my personal feelings on these kind of romances, and I think it works well for the characters, even if it makes me want to pull my hair out. Being frustrated by the romance not being pushed along is part of the fun for me. Next, I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. This one's written by Heather Fawcett and narrated by Elle Potter, who carries most of the narration, and Michael Dodds, who takes up a chapter of the book. And while it seems like a small part of the book, if you know nothing of it, it's done in a really charming way. I picked up this book because of With Cindy, who mentioned recently reading one of Heather Fawcett's middle grade books, The Islands of Elsewhere, but mentioned preferring the author's adult books, which is this one. I'm also pretty sure I've seen it somewhere on Book Talk. I went into this pretty blindly. I just knew it had something to do with fairies, which are all the rage with book girlies. But I didn't expect to be so outright charmed by this book. I guess those fairy enchantments worked better on me than they did on Professor Emily Wilde. Now, I love a socially inept shut-in. Genuinely, watching Emily fumble through her social interactions was as delightful as it was watching her brain work. She's so clever and really tries to think her way through a problem. And then we have Wendell Bamblebee. This lazy, whiny, but somehow a clean freak academic rival who's actually my favorite ever because holy fuck, he's really charming. Because what I love about these two is how well they play off of each other without the characters ever feeling like they're just there to push along the other person's plot. Emily pushes Wendell to work hard and do the right thing, while Wendell gently guides her through the labyrinth of social encounters without ever really taking the reins. And of course, spoilers, Wendell is also a courtly fae, and by stupid fae logic, he has to step back and let the mortal who he's obsessed with unravel the mortal stories. But Emily, being who she is, was like, it's so obvious everyone else is an idiot for not knowing. I love watching him pretend to be immortal. Plus, who doesn't love a love interest who's head over heels in love with the main character, and the main character is a silly blind idiot who's too focused on her academia. And I love that all the saving that Emily does is mostly driven by the same pursuit of academic prestige. Saving is usually secondary, and I just love how flawed these characters are. I enjoyed all of the European folklore. I loved all of the characters, even the side ones. A shout out to Poe, my favorite little spindly creature. And I think what Heather Fawcett really nails in these stories is how underlyingly horrifying fae creatures are. I can't recommend this one enough. Genuinely such a fun read, and to say it once more for the first book, I was truly charmed by it, which leads us into the second book, even though I read it at the end of the month. So I read Encyclopedia of Faeries at the beginning of the month, and Libby delivered this one at the end of the month. So while it was the last book of February that I listened to, I'm putting it third in the review. I was genuinely glad to have Emily and Wendell back. Again, I wasn't expecting to be so charmed by this series. It kicks off immediately with them being back in Cambridge and a time skip from the last book, albeit a short one. Of note, Emily is looking for Wendell's door back to his own fairy court. Her niece is studying to be a dryadologist like her aunt, and Emily and Wendell are on the verge of being fired. So, starts off strong, right? Then Wendell is poisoned and attacked on his birthday. Emily finds out that all of her pens and pencils are enchanted to turn into swords because the fact that he never keeps a pen or pencil on him is peak humor. Two new characters are introduced right from the get-go, which is Professor Rose, the department of head, and Ariadne, Emily's niece. I did enjoy how well-rounded Professor Rose was, and I enjoyed how at odds Emily is with both of them for completely different reasons. I wish Emily had some more one-on-one time with Ariadne. This book mostly takes place in Austria, where two old scholars went missing, and where Emily believes Wendell's door is. I think there's less focus on the village in this one, and more focus on Professor Rose and a bit of Ariadne. And more of the strange spectral visits from the two scholars who went missing into Faerie. There's a lot of action in this one, and for the first half, Wendell tends to save the day with his unnerving fae reflexes, but I think the final half of the book really lets Emily shine on her own, but I did really miss Wendell. So while I really enjoyed seeing the hunt for the doors and Wendell's whack-ass fairy logic, I loved Emily delving into Faerie. I enjoyed watching Emily get frustrated with the lack of logic of Faerie and the enchanted cloak that Wendell gave her. I also liked how much more mortals were intertwined with the Fae and Silver Loopy. Once again, I really love the unnerving and horrifying nature of Fae and how it affects moments with Wendell, but she ultimately decides that it's worth it. And we finally got to see his cat, which is exactly how I imagined her to be from the first book. I liked M's showdown with the Queen. I think it was very short, but I loved watching her outsmart the Fae, even if she's actively being muddled. And then, once again, I had a great time listening to Michael Dodd's voice work during Wendell's passage. I love listening to how Wendell views the world and admires M. It's always a bonus treat within the book. I think where the first book could have been wrapped up with a little bow and called there, I think this leads more directly into the third book. So I'm excited to see how that goes. And I also really enjoyed the moment at the end between Ariadne and Emily. I kind of wish it was more fleshed out. Emily is so bristly, but I think that's what I admire about her, and I admire the effort she takes to soften towards people she does care about. I could probably keep rambling about this book, but if you like weird folklore, if you like quieter romance, but the MMC is still madly in love with the FMC, check out these books. Next, I read The Atlas Paradox, which is book 2 in the Atlas series. I reviewed the first one last month, and if I thought it had a lot of narrators before, we've gone up to 10 narrators in this book. They are Alexander Palting, Andy Ingalls, Caitlin Kelly, Damian Lynch, Daniel Henning, David Monteith, James Patrick Cronin, Mooneri Grace, Saiho Elsmore, and Steve West. Okay, that's it. This book takes place maybe a month or so after the finale of book 1, and as I'm looking over my notes on this book, they're so fucking scattered, so please bear with me. Starting off, I love Mooneri as Parisa. The way she speaks almost reminds me of having to lean in to listen to her. She's really captivating as Parisa, and I love listening to how Parisa's mind works. I love the subtlety of her abilities and how she works. She's always scheming, and I really love the final scene with her and Dalton. You'll be hearing this a lot, but I'm dying to know what happens in book 3. Steve West's work as Callum was really interesting too. I said in my previous review that he makes my skin crawl in a good way, and I enjoyed the narration more in the Atlas Paradox. I've listened to his work before, and I just kind of now realized it. I previously heard his work in We Hunt the Flame, and I enjoyed it there a lot. I feel like Callum got a lot more development here, and I was glad to see his willingness to work with the other 4, not to mention getting to see his weaknesses per se. I previously said that Nico is one of my favorite characters, and that did not change in this book. I love how much he cares for people, and watching his care and love for both Libby and Gideon, especially Gideon, was so tender. And his scene with Parisa, my heart was squeezing. He's a guy a lot of people take for a brute, but he's got a bleeding heart, and I really adore it. I also enjoy following Reyna's POV throughout the story because she's truly one of the most stubborn characters in the books. I loved that she was so set on being angry with Nico, but I'm too aloof to admit this hurt me, and the resulting distance that you never tried to close hurt me more. She's such a great character that appears 2D at first, but really flourishes here in some interesting ways. Again, I'm really curious to see where she goes in the 3rd book. Now Tristan, he really grows into his own in this book, both in personality and ability. While his methodology was completely insane, I really enjoyed watching him struggle with his abilities. I also really enjoyed his final showdown with Callum. I love the acknowledgement that even if Callum might have implanted feelings, they still felt real to him. I also really appreciated the growth he got away from Callum and Parisa, and I wish he and Nico's friendship could have flourished a bit more. Gideon was also a very welcome point of view during the story. I really liked his perspective of the world. He tended to be much more whimsical, especially when it came to his dream planes. Also, the ending with him and Nico. I was really worried we'd feel baited, but I was pleasantly surprised by it. It gave me some familiar vibes. JVic Nation, how we feelin'? Now for Libby. Listening to some of Libby's sections made my heart twist. She's definitely going through it in this book, and part of why I liked her so much in the first book is because I related to her. So there were some inner monologues that were hard to swallow for me, but I always appreciate seeing anxious overthinkers in media because they're just like me, for real, for real. Seeing more from Ezra is really interesting because he is most morally correct in his mind. He is a character who truly feels like he's acting in the best interest of the universe and is willing to burn it all down to save the world. And yet, I hated listening to him talk about Libby. His savior complex is so strong, and yet he yearns for her so much it made my head spin. You see it so much with his final showdown with Atlas, and ultimately I think he got what he deserved considering everything he'd done. I'll preface this last bit with what I love about the Atlas series is how tremendously flawed some of the characters are, even when you think they'd fit into a more morally correct alignment. Libby meets Belen while hiding out in Larkma, a West Coast magical university. It's a reoccurring flaw we see in Libby that she isn't honest with the people in her life, and she uses them, whether intentionally or not. In her mind, she truly categorizes who she's justifiably using and who she just needs their support. I loved Belen as a character, and I wish she didn't suffer at the hands of Libby. I loved seeing her past and her authenticity after meeting Libby, and I enjoyed seeing what she becomes in the present. Because her past makes sense. Belen dealing with the kind of discriminatory men in STEM, something that women and people of color still suffer through today, is something to connect to. But the buildup of their relationship, despite Libby knowing better because she needs comfort and support, so the climax of their relationship, their fight at Stonehenge, really makes sense. The way Libby snaps, and the way Parisa was right about everyone being changed because of the society, is why I liked her going, but I'm not Callum or Parisa, I'm not manipulative. When she is, whether it's intentional or not. She uses the people around her all the time. Ezra for the security he brings, Tristan to confirm her need to just take what she wants, and Belen for the similar security and safety she needed while being trapped in the past. And finally, seeing the world from Belen's older perspective was really gratifying. I understand her rage and her feelings towards the world. Basically, Belen is based. I genuinely hope we see more from her, because there's no way her story ends like this. It's what I enjoy about these books. These characters are not perfect, and there's good in the bad and bad in the good. Back at it again with the Tamsyn Muir special, narrated by Moira Quirk, Harrow the Ninth. Right from the get-go, I could really see how different this book was going to be and why someone might not like it. I think this is one that helps to have a narrator for, especially listening to the way the POV shifts during Harrow's memories of the Canaan house and the current timelines. So, I can imagine how someone might not enjoy reading this sort of thing, but Moira Quirk absolutely kills it with this narration here. Especially when the POV of "you said, you do" is narrated in Gideon's voice. So when the first "me" is dropped, I was so freaking hype. I really loved the way Harrow stumbles into incorrect parts of her memories, especially when Abigail is involved, flat out telling her so, because she's truly built up a fractured past that's just flat out wrong. And at first I thought it was her brain dropping the truth, but then to find out it's actual spirits trying to guide Harrow back to the truth, ugh, so good. I also admit Palamedes was one of my favorite characters in Gideon the Ninth, so I was absolutely thrilled to have a glimpse of him back. The story is also as funny as it was in the first book, and as grotesque. Again, Paladin here reading about necromancers. It can be a bit rough. But I was also completely blindsided by non-planet left grief memes. Tamsyn Muir does such a good job of blending comedy and gravitas. Now, when Gideon finally started fighting, I was truly hyped. I missed Gideon so much. I loved her direct commentary, and while I was surviving on her sly commentary on the pommel and having her literally at the forefront again was delightful. I loved her having her heart wrenched and cursing Harrow's bloodline at the same time. It was just phenomenal. Not to say the book was slow, but the last 3 to 4 hours were definitely a downhill roller coaster with no breaks. You truly feel as distraught and confused as the main characters. Also, Gideon's commentary on Gideon Prime, mwah, chef's kiss. But then realizing he's actually gone, like, oh my god. Especially when you're confused as to why Gideon Prime yanked the glasses off Gideon Jr. Shout out to Cozy Cabbage who sat through all of my excited ramblings about this book every time I got home from work. Honestly, just what a wild ride from start to finish. Like putting it together a puzzle, but the puzzle pieces exploded all over my house and I have to find each missing piece. That being said, I feel like Tamsyn Muir is going to get me again with a wildly different book and I'm excited for it. So I listened to one less book last time and I'm already excited for the next month. Thank you for sticking around and drop a comment telling me what you thought of these books or drop a comment with a book you'd like me to read. Stay hydrated, get some rest, have some good meals, enjoy some good me time, and see you on the next adventure.